But we've been down this road before. I mean, we've literally been down this road before with this particular iteration of Daredevil. So it just wasn't something that I was particularly interested in seeing in the story this time around. I think if they really truly wanted to do a restart, they should have restarted and just given us a fresh story, introduced the new characters, reacquainted us with the older ones, started to build their way to certain aspects, like, Fisk is mayor by the end of the first episode. What sense does that make?
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Welcome everybody to Blerdlines. This is your man Cam. With me, as always, is
the other Cam, Stagger Lee in the flesh,
as well as
Professor D.
And we are here talking about Daredevil Born Again, the latest MCU TV series on Disney Plus, part of the quote unquote Marvel Knights-ish, aka the grittier Marvel. It's more ground level, less cosmic and aliens and people flying, but more crime drama and legal stuff. And I believe it's called Prestige TV.
Oh, is that what they're doing?
If you can't tell from my slight sarcasm, we finished up Daredevil Born Again. But now, just to give context, Daredevil Born Again is one of Frank Miller, who is a comic book writer and extraordinaire, is one of his seminal storylines from the 80s, I believe, in Daredevil. And so that particular storyline basically it's a Fisk versus Daredevil situation, and Fisk is essentially trying to destroy Matt Murdock the person, which also destroys Daredevil the person. So he does a lot of things that kind of just like strips away his life, and he slowly starts to descend into a paranoia and kind of an insanity thing as Fisk basically keeps fucking with them until he can because he wants to break Matt Murdock the man. Now the TV show has took pieces of that and mixed it with other things. And so that's the premise that we have. And this is the first of the original Netflix characters that were on there that's back on Disney Plus now. So, Netflix had their Defenders, which was Daredevil, Iron Fist, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones. They had a embargo on all the characters once they were done with Netflix for, I think it was like 3 to 4 years. And now that that's done, now they can kind of make, if they want to, they can take some of these characters. And so Daredevil popped up in Spider-Man No Way Home, or popped up in Spider-Man. He also popped up in She-Hulk. And so now he has his own show. He's back. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with the things that we liked and then give the rest of the shows the things that we disliked.
Wait, before we get started, who created Daredevil?
Daredevil was created by, that's a great question, actually.
Stan Lee. Frank Miller made it popular.
Frank Miller wrote the Born Again book that
this particularly,
based, that is largely borrowing from that particular comic storyline. But Stan Lee created Daredevil, or at least he's credited as to having created Daredevil. But Frank Miller wrote the sort of seminal work piece, the seminal Daredevil story.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, Frank Miller. Frank Miller essentially made Daredevil what it is today. And so at the time of Frank Miller's writing, that's around the same time Alan Moore came out with Watchmen. So like there was a sense for the comics at that time to kind of go away from their like happy, bright tone that they have to a more of a darker, grittier, like almost realistic, and trying to ground it in more reality. So there was a lot of things like alcoholism,
more relatable stuff. Yeah,
alcoholism, drug addiction, mental paranoia and all that kind of stuff. So they really, like, I would say Alan Moore and Frank Miller kind of grounded comics into a more realistic aspect of it, and people started to relate to it, and it kind of began the turn of comics being in this dark and gritty place. So Daredevil Born Again,
deconstructive place.
And deconstructive. And so Daredevil Born Again was one of those stories. Watchmen was another one of those stories. And this is around the same era. So there was a lot of grittiness. And this is, took place.
The Dark Knight Returns is another one.
Yes, exactly.
And
Dark
then
Knight
Dark Knight
Returns.
Returns is Frank Miller or is that Alan
Mhm.
Moore? Frank
That was
Miller, right?
Frank Miller as well. Yeah, Frank Miller as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
But this is so this is like mid '80s, and so this is around the time when it was a very like seminal time for comics because this was the first time people looked at comics as like being more than just like the funny books or whatever you want to put it. But yeah, so Daredevil created by Stan Lee with a little bit of help from Jack Kirby, but it was Frank Miller that kind of put his stamp on it to make Daredevil like an actual like character that people like respected and thought was up on the same level as these other characters that we've all known and loved. So with all of that said, we now get to Daredevil Born Again on Disney. And it was 9 episodes, some weird number like that, which I still don't know why they did that.
Yeah, the 9 episode. I guess this is technically season 1, even though it's more appropriately season 4 to the legacy of the Netflix series because it's just carrying over from that. But yeah, 9 episodes that I think at least 4 of those were complete. 3 or 4 of those were completely unnecessary. But we're starting at the good stuff.
All right, so good stuff from me. I would say like Daredevil as the character and the fight choreography and that stuff, super fun. Like I love the Billy Club stuff. Like they were getting really inventive of how they were fighting, which was really cool. We had our good friend Frank Castle was back. John Barenthal try to wrestle the throne from Ray Stevenson as the best Frank Castle. And he again every time Frank Castle's on screen, it's automatically like yes, you're happy, you start nodding, you're like okay, Frank's here, he gets to like smack Matt Murdock alike to give him a little shake of reality out of his high horseness.
He definitely brings another energy to the Daredevil world, and when he shows up, it's always a good thing. I mean, you always feel that change.
Yeah, 100%. And then Vincent D'Onofrio, which I always mess that up. His Kingpin again, same thing. Like he just every time he's on, he is Kingpin. He's embodied this character. It works. The way he carries the gravitas and all that kind of thing. He kind of again just brought that back from the previous show. So you're already in it. And so that those aspects of it cool. So the supporting cast of what the show was, I thought was really good in terms of how they did it. Even the villain character, Muse, which is a cool character that's actually a recent one, I think in the last maybe like year or something like that, was like in terms of how they carried it from the page to the screen was actually pretty cool. That's all I got, guys, for positive.
Yeah, I think I had a few, obviously Coxon and John Bernthal have really created a nice chemistry on screen for those two characters, and they really embody the characteristics well. And so I really like the philosophical exchanges between those two, with Punisher basically saying, basically telling him it's his fault that Foggy was dead in the first place, and at that point in the story, Bullseye was still a threat, and so I liked that back and forth. They did some interesting things in terms of how they ended the season. They set up a lot of narrative pathways for the future that I thought was good, and I was surprised that they were able to put the world dynamics on its head, even though I'll come back to that later when we talk about some of the bad things. But in the past, they've always kind of had all the villains, kind of wrapped up in the end, and then the next season is just what's going to happen. But now they just sort of established Kingpin and his wife as sort of these two overarching antagonists of the story, and it allows them to introduce all of these other smaller villains whilst having to deal with Kingpin. And again, I'll come back to the storyline of the mayor campaign and all of that and how it played out. But him being a fixture as the main antagonist of the story continuously, I think works rather than have him dealt with, like they were trying to do in the old series where he's defeated and then he disappears and then there's another big bad and then here he comes back somehow. Whereas now it's like, okay, he's the big bad, but kind of like the way Homelander is on The Boys, where he's there and he's going to have to be dealt with. But in the meantime, you can't just come at him heads on. Like he's legitimately uh, the king that you can't come at straight up now. And I think again that was a good dynamic that they created. And then other than that, upgrade on the love interest from Karen to Heather Glenn, I thought it was a much better character and lady companion for Matt Murdock, Daredevil. But there's part of that changed as I got to the end. So I'll wrap back around once, Cam, I'll let you go ahead and talk about what you felt worked.
For me, what I enjoyed was how they had, I don't want to say a plethora of villains, but how they juggled the amount of villains in 9 episodes with Poindexter, Muse, Kingpin, the low level mob, the cops and whatnot. I think they
Vanessa
did.
Fisk. Vanessa Fisk was actually revealed to be the hidden antagonist of the season. Unlike, Kingpin's overarching, but she was sort of moving, creating most of the main obstacles for Matt.
Yeah. And so I commend them for being able to juggle so many villains and giving them their proper time and shine and whatnot. I also kind of enjoy, and this is one of my biggest critiques about being on Disney, was the violent nature of Daredevil and having Punisher from the Netflix transfer it to the Disney side. I think they did a decent job, although my one critique is that the bullet looked a little CGI-ish, obviously. But I commend them for at least sticking with how Netflix showed it, and it was really gore in a sense, where it's like, so that part was cool. But for me, like, it was just the fact that, like I said, a lot of characters got their shine. I dug how they balanced that part out as far as villains. And the pacing was a little off, but we can get into that later. But that's for me. That was the only 2 things that shined for me. And that's not to say it was terrible. It was just those are the things that stood out. And before we get into this other part of Daredevil, I don't want to say it's like terrible or anything. It's just that there's a lot of things that stood out that bug me. And it's fixable. Like I said, if you watch the entire series, there's a lot of paths to different storylines that can be told. But one of the few regrets is I don't think Muse, in my opinion, I thought Muse was killed off a little too early. That's just me. I think they could have done something more.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm gonna get into that in my honor, but I agree. I think that Muse was improper. I said this offline to Cam that I think this is an example of what we've talked about many times before, which is it's not about what the story is, but how it's told. And here you have an example of a lot of moving parts, a lot of components that never land in a storytelling structure that is consistent throughout.
Yeah, and I would, and that
came in way too late, in my opinion.
Yeah, and so like actually now that we've gotten the pleasantries out the way, now it's like. Anyways, I would say one, basically you could watch episode 1 and then skip to like 6, 7, 8, 9, and you're good. And the reason I would say that was just because for those episodes in between from 2, 3, 4, and 5, it was like I'm either watching Matt Murdock, Attorney at Law, or the Kingpin in couples therapy. And like that was the overarching stories for 3 to 4 episodes. And I'm like, I'm here for Daredevil. Where's Daredevil at? Then we have White Tiger, who is a cool character, actually. He's an interesting character in the comics, something that could have been done. You could do some stuff with it. But for this purpose of the narrative, it was almost like, I know what they were trying to do, but it didn't come off it. It was like he could have easily been anything. It didn't make any sense.
He could have been left out.
Yeah. They could have cut him out completely.
For what they used him for, it was too much of a low stakes situation. I mean, it didn't add anything. And for it to then pivot and then connect to both Muse and Heather Glenn, I was like, what are they doing here? Like, what is going on?
Yeah. And I would say the other aspect of it was just like, from a comic book nerd situation, like his daughter's there, she could pick up the mantle, she could be White Tiger, she could be in Champions later on with all this. The team Champions, for people that don't know, is like Marvel.
Well, that was his niece. That was his niece.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So his niece or whatever. So like theoretically, she could pick up the mantle and she could be like the Champions, which is basically the Teen Titans version of Marvel. So that's like Miss Marvel, Kate Bishop, a couple other characters, blah, 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 blah. But like you said, like you didn't need him at all. It didn't serve any, it didn't push the narrative along. All it did was make Mac feel sad that like he can't do stuff because he's not Daredevil anymore. And you're like, you could have done, I was sitting there waiting for I felt like, what it was? I felt like Titans, that first season where I was waiting for Dick Grayson to become Nightwing. And he wouldn't put on a freaking costume for the whole season. And I was like, what are we doing here? Oh. Yeah, I was like, what
Dick Grayson, you mean the whole 2 seasons, because Dick Grayson didn't become Nightwing until the end of season 2.
I would not know that because I stopped after season 1.
Yeah, he was still Robin at the end of season 1. But anyway, yeah, so it's the same vibe where you have episode, he's only Daredevil or in the costume for the first part of the first episode, and then from there he doesn't put on the full costume or the costume at all until episode 6. So there's a really big gap in time, and then we're talking about a show in which we're asked to wait each week to see what's going to happen, and we're not. That's why I was so glad that I made the decision to watch it, once episodes had already passed, 100%. and then binge it as a full story, because, to me, at least 4 of those episodes are unnecessary, and where they filled them with certain, I got really frustrated when they tried to do the twist of Muse and Heather Glenn, and I was like, so you mean to tell me we couldn't have substituted his therapy scenes with the Kingpin stuff, with the marriage therapy scenes, and built to that twist and actually made it mean something? Because you wasted a lot of time, and then there's just the silliness around it, the triteness and laziness of the writing. I don't know what it means, how it works with the blind impaired, and I don't know if they can actually feel certain textures and make the outlines in the way that he was able to, in the moment, figure out that Muse had drawn Heather Glenn's face, and then make it there in time enough to save it. It just,
that was there's a lot of
and there's a lot of that in this particular storytelling. Too much filler, too much exposition, too much characters telling us things that we could be seeing, and then showing us stuff that don't matter or doesn't add anything to this whole overall, that doesn't world build and doesn't add to any of this narrative.
And you're right, because I mean, if they would have substituted all of the couples therapy stuff with Muse's therapy, then you're right. We would build up to this little level of like, oh, now we care about this like tortured artist, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, he's a killer.
And also, in addition to what you just said, if you're doing the whole theme about vigilantism, then why not show him at the very beginning? See, there were so many things that were missing from the first episode that should have been there.
Wait, show who in the very beginning? Muse or Daredevil?
Muse.
Okay.
Muse. That should have been there. He should have been not just this background aesthetic, this leitmotif, but an actual active part of the narrative. If we're going to see scenes of Heather, we establish she's a therapist, and we establish that she's supposed to be that she's much like her and Matt both have their secrets or whatever. Then make him a character. Allow him to be one of her, maybe not even explain it, but he's going to therapy. This is one of her clients. And then because to me, when he started revealing all that stuff to her and she inspired him to be an artist, it meant nothing because we didn't see it before that moment. And it was just a weird character talking and telling us stuff.
Yeah, it was weird.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Cam.
I was going to say it didn't feel earned. We just saw a clip of him saying, I need therapy. And then in the next scene, he's like, I'm revealing everything. And I'm like, when did we build up?
Yeah, exactly. I was like,
she was his inspiration and, all this stuff. That's why the whole thing was just, again, super lazy, super trite. Matt, again, being able to make it go through the crime scene and figure that out in time to make it to the apartment and fight him, it's just too much. It borders. It's like, here's the very thin thread of will and suspension of disbelief, but when you do things like that, it just snaps it into stupidity. And that's what we were dealing with. We just got, and even the Foggy Nelson thing, I wrote that Foggy Nelson's shadow still looms. I had said during the preview or when we talked about the first episode that I was happy they wrote him out, that he was dead. But I really meant that I was happy that they wrote the characters out because I felt that they always weighed down the story. Now here you have again with this plot twist that they don't work on. They just throw in there and you kind of figure that there was going to be something connected to his murder. But the whole time I kept thinking when the reveal happened is, why did she kill? Why kill Foggy though? Why kill the lawyer in this situation? Like, what was the whole point of that? It seemed capricious for no reason at all.
It just, like you said, there's all these like reveals that had no buildup, and so you get this like the Muse thing was weird because we didn't know who Muse was for 6 episodes, and then one episode we focus on this random tortured artist that just happens to be the serial killer. Foggy gets killed in the beginning. Yeah, Foggy gets killed by Bullseye. Now, Bullseye, insane dude, he does his thing. If they would have said that's what
he hates Daredevil, he hates them. There's a history there. That's what everybody assumed.
Simple. I would have been completely fine with that. Yeah, it's cool. But then to make this.
But then also one other question. I'm sorry. One other question. Why Bullseye to kill Foggy Nelson?
Yeah,
it seems like way cheaper, more prudent, and less trouble to just have one of the goons run up on Foggy. Yep. I'm saying, like, why did you have to get the most skilled and trained assassin to kill an unassuming lawyer who would give any assassin zero gruff?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out. Okay, so maybe I'm not familiar with Bullseye as a comic book character. But as an assassin, long range sniper, no one will know who you are. That whole Bullseye coming onto the scene, making himself known was unnecessary.
It made no sense.
It made no sense. Now, if a low level goon did it, I can understand him getting up close and personal because he's not that type of assassin. But the fact that he came that close, I mean, if you the best of the best, you could have knocked him out 1,000 meters away because you're Bullseye, right?
And we know that he has that skill. I mean, that's
and they could have came to that conclusion a whole different way.
Yeah,
how to investigate somebody with professional marksman, then they can narrow down. But this dude came and made himself known and was like, "Hey, I'm Daredevil. I'm up close and personal." I'm like, why would you do that?
and they proved that.
Make a lot of sense.
And they prove that point even later in the show when Bullseye escapes and he takes his tooth out, spits it at the dude's eye, and then takes another like a small thing and kill. So like, yo, he did all these like fantastical things to break out of prison. He could have took a paperclip and killed Foggy from a block away.
All I know is when they had Poindexter, Bullseye handcuffed, they had all these crazy contraptions on. So in this one scene, all he had was these leather straps. I was like, okay. So you let go, you tone down the security for this one time? That's what I knew. I was like, all right.
But then, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't the story, narratively, it was Fist that had him moved?
Yeah.
That's what
so when did I miss something and miss that the mayor of New York had the power to move a federal high-end prison from a Fed to a city penitentiary, a city facility? When has ever the mayor of New York City had that power?
All right, man, moment right there.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's going back to what Cam said in the last one, we were talking about the first episode. It's just Marvel logic. Like, it just didn't make any sense. And then on top of that, my thing was like, yo, you're going to take Bullseye, release him into Gen Pop. Like, that's literally that's a budgeted choreo fight scene. But instead, it was just fade to black. Now he's has bruises, and he's just saying, hey, what's going on? Like,
he probably dressed up as a guard, and then he goes and he tries to kill Kingpin. I'm like, they just show, why not kill Vanessa Fist? And I don't understand what your deal is, dude. What are you doing? I was very confused by Bullseye's presence at that point in the story, and why I didn't understand Vanessa Fist, her reason for having Foggy kill. I didn't get that.
What I could tell was it was that whole part about the Freeport. That was the motivation. To operate.
No, I got that part, but I'm saying that was very thin. A very thin reason to kill a lawyer. I could see if there was something more at stake, but
so here's my opinion on that part. I think the writers probably wanted to give like a significant emotional impact for Matt Murdock's motivation.
Oh, of course.
But it was just poorly executed, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, no doubt. But then here's another thing: Yusef Khan. That may have been the most forced cameo of attempt to bring in an outside. It was so forced I couldn't even. And then they didn't. When I thought it was over, when Matt leaves the bank, it goes into a whole nother sequence of a bank robbery. One that was so thinly written that it just seemed goofy the whole way through. And Matt comes all the way back to the robbery after he's several blocks away.
And this doesn't make again, it goes back to, it doesn't make sense, right? Like, the whole episode as a whole doesn't even need to be there. But if it was, you're right. You waste. Matt's already in the spot. If the robbery happened, he's already there. He's talking to Yusef. Cool. Okay. There's robbery. But to, like you said, a robbery in New York and Spider-Man don't show up. Word.
A robbery in New York in
the daytime.
The way they made it set up is that these guys had no exit strategy. So when I saw that, I was like, so their plan was basically to do a bank robbery and then die. Because this is post 9/11 New York City. They created a thing called the national security. It's national. It like the NS. Like, you have to if you rob a bank, then you have to have an elaborate escape plan. Meaning you're drilling the hole through the floor to the sewer. You got some kind of speedy vehicle that can drift you out and get you at a place where the satellites won't pick you. I'm just saying, like, it's too intricate. So if you're gonna go with a robbery, you can't be lazy about it. You have to be a little bit more creative with how you do it, because of all of the things that we recognize in contemporary society. National security is at a height. In post 9/11, you're not getting. If you rob a bank in the middle of New York, now I can see if it's a heist, if it's an elaborate heist, but nobody move. This is a stick up bank robbery in the middle of New York. You're dead within 15 minutes.
Yeah, only one person or two people were supposed to get out of that. The guy that was a cop and the person that was getting the jewel. But here's the thing. Cam, you touched on this. If the writers wanted to continue making Daredevil be Matt Murdock, they could have gave Matt Murdock a couple motivations to do something as Daredevil, but under the guise of Matt Murdock, but have Spider-Man off camera wrap the dude up in the end, because Spider-Man exists for low-level criminals, in my opinion. And this is one of the problems
That's his thing. That's his thing. In New York City, you cannot have one without the other. That means your world is inconsistent. So, called a continuity error.
So I get why the Avengers are not there, because this is below their pay grade, but this is not below Spider-Man. And then if they just
Avengers are also splintered. I get that.
Yeah.
So
if they'd have came out, had another scene and seen dude wrapped up in the rib without seeing Spider-Man, I'd have been like, oh, Spider-Man did this. It's kind of like
just played a Spider-Man score. Like you just had the score in the background and then saw that Matt Murdock looks up and the dudes are like in a thing, and he just like kind of smiles and walks away. Like that.
Then I'd have been
enough
cool with
to
that.
Keep your world intact.
So here's another thing. This is why I think the Penguin is written so well. They didn't do a lot of crime at night because of the presence of Batman.
Because of the Batman.
So if they were able to translate that, like I said, you have to have, like I said, a Spider-Man or some other. If you want to keep Daredevil being Matt Murdock and you don't want him to be outside doing all this crazy stuff and keep that thing, have another superhero capture these dudes.
Look, bank robbery in the middle, just like you're saying. What movie did we just see? Captain America: Brave New World. Where was Cap? Where was Cap?
Yeah,
that's making national news, baby. A bank robbery in the middle of where was Miss? Why didn't Miss Marvel attempt? Why didn't we see Kamala Khan almost there? And then it gets solved and she's walking away. Because if she sees her dad is in trouble, she knows he works at that bank. She's in Jersey City. It's national news. Why wouldn't she break any kind of protocol to go help her dad?
Yep,
she wouldn't.
Because they're trying to set us up for hopefully more street level, like the Defenders or something like that.
Yeah, it just like you say.
But you had Swordsman in there, and you acknowledged him as Swordsman again. More exposition, but you never show him in the costume. You never show him doing anything.
Once.
Oh, he's like fencing for some thugs, right?
Oh, that's right. That's right. It was very quick. And also, I didn't remember in Hawkeye Tony Dalton doing the accent, but maybe that was just
it was slight.
It was
slight. He did it.
Oh, okay. Okay. So. I mean, he was bad at it in this. Like, it was going in and out. Like, he couldn't keep up. He couldn't keep it going. And he's a talented actor, but that was just not working.
But I think that's an overall theme. Was just like there were so many inconsistencies where, like, if I'm in I live in New York. New York is huge, but there are certain things that if something happened, everybody would know it.
Everybody knows.
If Incredible Hulk was in the middle of Times Square, everybody would know it. And they'd be talking about it for the next 2 weeks, Like you said, a bank robbery happens in New York City. That doesn't happen anymore. Right? So if it did, and if it just happened to be at a superhero's dad's bank, come on now, son.
She's going to hear about it. Even if she's at school, she's going to hear about it. And she's going to find her. Like I said, it would have made sense even if they just had her walking up and going to run to hug her dad and him being like, oh, Kamala, what are you doing here? And kind of like, because he's goofy, being unable to like kind of hide the fact that how is she there? You know what I mean? Like, but that would have been obviously an if you know moment. And the way to get around if you're not going to do that is to just not write it. Just not write that in there. The more episodes, that's why I said this could have been done in 6 episodes. The more episodes you have in this situation trying to expand that story, the more plot holes you create for the greater scope narrative of the MCU, and that's the hole that that they've dug themselves in, because you start to ask the questions like that. That's why I wouldn't have written a bank robbery for this show, not for a street level of Matt Murdock, Daredevil, who mostly operates at night. No,
Unless Luke
it should
Cage
have
was
been.
in there inside the bank or something like that.
Unless it's something like that, or Jessica Jones is opening up a new account or something like that,
Yeah.
okay. Or Iron Fist, yeah, okay, then throw it in there. But anything barring that, you don't need it to be there. In my opinion, the strength would have been is if they had the Kingpin, Camp Mayor stuff in the background. What's going on with him trying to fully grab onto his mayoral government power while also dealing with the criminal underworld that's trying to come at the king, and Muse as the central antagonist of as a serial killer. If they had did that in the same way that the Batman did with the Riddler, and then you had Carmine Falcone as the overarching antagonist who set a lot of the stuff in motion. You had other major antagonists, but they weren't central villains like Penguin and Catwoman and all of these people. They operated as characters. You can do that and it'll work out for you. 6 episodes was all they needed. Though there was three of those episodes were completely filler and unnecessary.
Yeah, I mean, you could have done, like I said, you could skip 2, 3, 4, 5, and then get straight to 6 when he finally puts the suit back on. And like you said, if you could break this down to 6 episodes, you could cut a lot of the fat. But you're right, they kind of meandered where there was a whole episode where it was just Matt Murdock, attorney at law. And then there's another episode.
Yeah, it was a whole case, and it involved White Tiger, and then he gets acquitted, and then pow, he's gone. They kill him, and
White Tiger to prove that the cops were corrupt.
Yeah,
no, we didn't need that.
Too long the writers took too long to get to the central premise, which was to be Daredevil again. They were trying to find an excuse for him not to be Daredevil, to give us some satisfactory motivation for him to finally don the costume.
Yeah, and I think the thing too is, and that's why it was unfortunate they called this Born Again, because in the Born Again comic, the reason why he's not in it, Will's fist blows up his apartment. So Matt Murdock, the person, is having his IRS stuff got seized. His apartment blew up. He's not with Karen Page anymore. He's at his lowest, and this is all Fisk is doing. So he's making him this. Daredevil slowly starting to make Matt go insane. He starts becoming obsessed with it because they're both obsessed with each other essentially. But
which they hint at that. They hinted that, and D'Onofrio was good in the scene where he talks about why he's so obsessed with Matt and what Matt and Daredevil did to him. He can't let it go. The issue I have with their dynamic is I don't understand why, if he knows Matt Murdock is Daredevil, why is that not his biggest? I mean, I get it. That's his doomsday device, but he was making it seem like he needed to take him down, and barring failing to kill him, just reveal who he is. I mean, who he is.
Totally. And I think that was the part was so weird because I'm like, they were trying to paint this picture where both of them are trying to fight against who they really are, right? Daredevil's like, oh, I'm really mad now.
They kept doing that with the editing, and it was so annoying. That was so annoying.
It's because I know we knew what they were trying to do, but they weren't doing it in a way that was convincing.
So it never convinced me, especially for Kingpin, because Kingpin's never going to be good. You're just trying to figure out what was going to be his revealing moment. Like, I was never convinced. They were trying to put Kingpin into a more sympathetic light. I was like, I'm not feeling it. Like, it's never going to happen. It's the Kingpin.
Really? I thought they were trying to hold him into a more Trumpian light, where they were
that too, but they want to make him more sympathetic, where he's like, I'm just like, nah, I'm not buying this. Like, it's the Kingpin. Like, what is the ultimate motivation for him trying to be mayor? Where is the means to an end? And then we find out 7 episodes later and he knew everything. And I'm like, all right, you know. So the couples therapy was trying to put some light that he was dealing with some internal problems, which he is, but that's not what I'm here for. Like, I'm trying to see the Kingpin at his Kingpin. And we finally kind of got that when he started to really reveal his true self. And the commissioner was like, you've never really changed. You've always been the Kingpin. And he does that whole face thing, you know. So it's like, okay, cool. You know, they took a long-winded route to get where we already know where it was going, and that's.
But even the thing with, I agree 100% with that, and add to that the storyline with Adam. When they first started mentioning him, I was like, did I miss something from the last show? Who is this Adam dude? And I even got spoiled because I never saw them together. We never saw anything. It was all of this. And then we see him in the cage, and what are we supposed to take from this? Are we supposed to feel sorry for Vanessa, because she's very unsympathetic, and as callous and capricious as Kingpin, and sociopathic as Kingpin? So I didn't get what was going on. I got it. I mean, I get what they were trying to do. They were just doing it really, really bad, poorly. It was really, really bad execution. And then another thing that stood out was the lighting. I don't know if that stood out for you guys, but those night scenes were like those dark, really dark scenes, like the fight scene between Frank, Daredevil, and Frank Daredevil and the fanboys, as he called them, when they come up to the apartment.
Okay, so
it was very dark.
On my phone, watching it was an issue. On my TV, wasn't so bad, but I understand. So
yeah, even the episode where he's on the roof right before it ends and he's practicing, I was like, they should have put some moonlight there or something, because it looks super dark. You can barely see the outline of the sky and all of that stuff, the skyline and all of that. But it could have been just my TV settings, but that stood out to me.
Yeah, and then don't even get me started on the whole BB like report thing that was supposed to be like it was shot in a the 1:1 aspect ratio. And it was like interviewing the city and trying to have like kind of like a bloggy type vlog type thing. I was like, okay, one, that device works for a certain narrative, but for here it just was annoying. And it was just like random fake New Yorkers talking about how it really is New York. You know what I'm saying? I got to take my gun out and defend myself. I was like, wait, what are we doing here? Why are we why?
Like, you got a gun in New York? You should probably not admitted that. Like, no.
If Marvel's supposed to be in the real world, they're doing some unrealistic things with the storylines and the writing and the things that should be happening, like with the whole bank scene. And it should have been like, all hands on deck, and a guy on camera admitting that he has a firearm when it's supposed, you know, in New York, especially with their gun laws, like, you tripping, you just incriminated yourself, brother. So
yeah. And then also, I mean, you had shout out to James Gandolfini's son. What's his I always forget his name. I just call him the son.
Yeah, I don't know his I think is maybe Michael, but I'll have to look that up. But he's kind of still finding his way as a young actor. You could tell. Michael. Yeah, I thought so. Michael Gandolfini. Yeah. But he's got some potential, and I think he could do. They wrote some really odd dialogue for him, and had him deliver it in a really weird way that didn't make you care about the character as much as you were just kind of annoyed whenever you saw him and whenever he talked. But credit to him for still being able to kind of spin that when the turn comes, and he's kind of like reveals what he is underneath that sort of jolly, that the chubby, goofy guy. You know, like he's underneath that. There's a sly, cunning snake that is a little obviously written to be too obviously after power. I mean, it's so obvious that it just hurts, because it feels like somebody with low cunning writing somebody to have high cunning, but they come off as being low cunning. That's what it looked like the whole time.
And I think that's like a lot of the like where some of the supporting cast is really good. There's other supporting cast I was like, like even like the Buck character, which is like, Kingpin's like right hand man now. Like he was fine, but it was a very just
because they killed Wesley in the first season of the Netflix show.
And this is
everybody's used to Wesley being his guy, and they offed him like in the first season.
Yeah, and so he's just another British dude guy. Like he's not like a character that you care about or what you want.
Yeah, he's Wesley, just not Wesley. He's Wesley, but we can't call him Wesley because we all know that Wesley is dead. But that figure from the comic books being Wesley, he's Wesley. He's calling him Buck now.
And so I think there's, like you said, there is just so many inconsistencies in terms of like, and it's interesting to kind of watch it, and then we're texting each other as we're watching it, and we're just like, why am I watching couples therapy? Why am I doing that? It's like, why? And then I'm like, oh, Frank Castle's here. Okay, cool. Now
wait, hold on. So I called this show Matlock. That's what I was watching. Not Matt Murdock, Matlock.
That's good though. It just makes sense.
Yeah. So again, it's cool that they want to highlight Matt Murdock, the attorney. Like that's like a thing, but this wasn't the thing we wanted to see. Like again, when we watched, one of my critiques about the Batman franchise is that we don't never see the Dark Knight detective part of Batman. And when you have a movie that actually highlights his detective, he's the greatest detective of all, that's very fulfilling. So if there was like something that like we wanted to be like, oh, we want to understand how Matt Murdock is. So if you wanted to have like a Matt Murdock where the whole scene is around surrounding other heroes and Matt Murdock is just a lawyer. So like in Spider-Man, Matt Murdock is just a lawyer. If they had a scene where they showed him just as a lawyer, cool. We could see him having these struggles and trying to fight for the good fight, where you have all these other characters that we're more interested in. And Matt Murdock is a lawyer only. But you have a show that's called Daredevil, not Matlock or Matt Murdock, attorney at law. We got to see Daredevil, and I would rather see Matt Murdock maybe a scene or two as a lawyer that maybe gives him motivation to do other things. But we had a whole half of that season was him in the courtroom struggling with himself as a lawyer, trying to get his moral compass straight.
And that's
we've been down this road before. I mean, we've literally been down this road before with this particular iteration of Daredevil, Matt Murdock, and his inability or not trying to deal with being Daredevil and Matt Murdock. And so it just wasn't something that I was particularly interested in seeing in the story this time around. I think if they really truly wanted to do a restart, they should have restarted and just given us a fresh story, introduced the new characters, reacquainted us with the older ones, started to build their way to certain aspects. Like, Fisk is mayor by the end of the first episode. What sense does that make? And when you can kind of tell that story and let it breathe. And that's why I said I was. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, and I was going to say that would have been a better overarching thing, right? It's Matt Murdock as an attorney trying to not make sure that Kingpin becomes the mayor. So that's the overarching thing, while you have Muse as the underlining villain for the whole 8 episodes or whatever. Then you have these two competing things, like you said. So you have the big bad, which is Wilson Fisk, who ultimately wins because he becomes the mayor, and then you have this other serial killer that he's like two things. Now we have. I'm trying to be an attorney. I'm trying to catch the serial killer, and I'm still fighting against Fisk because he's my arch nemesis. Now, those are three things.
And as an attorney, you can fight Fisk, because what you just said would have been the smart structure, which was forget about this anti-vigilante stuff. The whole thing is Murdoch is trying to stop Fisk from becoming the mayor, and he can do that as Matt Murdock. And then on the ground level at night, there's this serial killer who's been offing all these people in Manhattan, and he's trying to figure out who it is. You can still have the Heather Glenn storyline.
Yep.
Just use instead of it being around Fisk and Vanessa, who we don't care about because they are pure villains. We don't want to, we don't need House of Cards inside Daredevil. We don't want to see Frank Underwood and his wife again. We don't want that. You know, if that's the case, that's fine. if that's the case, that's fine. But you know,
yeah, and I think that's
Daredevil.
And I think that's the thing where it's like there was all these competing things, and you're like, what are we doing here? And then when these things come in, like you said, the amount of exposition. Now going back to the good, like a good thing, yeah. When Frank Castle pops up, it was a great thing where Matt goes to Frank almost to ask permission to go beat people up, and Frank's like, "Yo, man, I don't know why you coming to me." I was like, "That's what I think."
So for me, Frank Castle coming in is like Mando coming in the Book of Boba Fett. Oh yeah,
yeah. Like now you're actually interested.
Now we got a show.
Yeah, like when I said he delivered the best line of dialogue in the whole show when he tells Daredevil straight up, he's like, "Look, man, if them fanboys come up here, ain't gonna be none of this patty cake shit. I'm cutting them down. You understand?"
and true to form, what did he do? He killed a bunch of cops, like with reckless. And I like that they're fighting, and Daredevil's like, "Yo, what are you doing?" And he's just like, "What?" Boom, 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 slap.
So yeah, he's like, "What? You gonna stop me from getting all of?" Like he's
again. Like, that was one of my biggest worries of having Frank Castle and Daredevil transferred from the Netflix version, where it was very violent. And I'm like, can Disney do this? Kudos to Disney for actually doing it. And I'm like, oh, okay. When Frank was on there, because like I said, it had some cringe moments. Like, oh man, like he broke his kneecap. Like, okay. So that part was pretty cool.
They were selective with it, but they did it well enough to where when it happened, they made it count, and I give them credit for that.
Yeah, and one of my friends, he did like 2 tours Iraq, one in Afghanistan. And he was just like, he's like, they portrayed how it would be if a bunch of cops, as a regular cop, they're on the beat and all that, as opposed to someone who's a special forces classically trained, like it's night and day. And so he's like, the way the fighting was in the choreography is like, yeah, a guy that knows that much amount of skill set would be able to take out a bunch of cops that are regular guys. Like, doesn't mean that they're slouches, but he's like, there's a clear difference from what Frank Castle is and how the cops guys are. And like, even when Frank walks into the fake Punisher's like lair, and he just starts laying them out, and I'm like, yo, go Disney.
Yeah, it takes them a little while to take them down. But that's also, again, I was saying about Josh. Shout out to the homie Josh, is that he was talking about the original Punisher cover with him, falling back against the brick wall and like all these bullets coming toward him, and he's just like look crazy and just shooting. And I was like, that is the visualization of the Punisher. Like it's head first right into it. He's taking all the punishment himself, but he's dishing out 10 times more than what he's taking. And that, I'm curious how they initially wrote Punisher for this, because I know that Bernthal said that when he got the script that he changed a bunch of what they had wrote. So I'm curious to know how they had Frank enter this story, because I thought this was just the right amount versus in season 2 where they had this whole other storyline tied to Frank of Daredevil of the Netflix show. But this was the right amount.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And it gives us enough that he'll have some shine in the second season for sure. And then, they supposedly are some other of the Netflix folks supposed to pop up.
Punisher's going to have his own spinoff again. So.
Yeah.
But I was going to mention, crazy, Disney accomplished what I thought Rebel Ridge was going to accomplish. Killing off bad cops.
Yeah.
Black Rebel Ridge, Rambo. I was like, they did all this to a black man, and he didn't kill one cop.
Yo, that propaganda, yo. It was, Rebel Ridge. Rebel Ridge was like patty cake. He was like, "Hey man, what's going on? Let me wrap your arms up and put you over to the side."
I'm surprised they showed Blue Lives Matter getting chopped down by Frank Castle. So
yeah, well, I mean, I'm pretty sure that, and Cam, you can confirm this or not, but I'm didn't Marvel release like a Punisher story a few years ago where he was doing that, where he was like going after those guys? I think.
Yeah, they basically changed once the Blue Lives Matter thing kind of started to pop off, and they started to co-opt that skull imagery, the logo. They actually changed the logo in the comics. Like they just basically was just like they kind of addressed it in the comics a little bit, but then they just drastically was just like, nah, we got to change this because it was just getting too much. And I could see that, kind of see why they did that. But yeah, it was one of those things where like, all right, it's gotten co-opted in a way that we didn't really intend to. So they're like, we're just going to wholesale change it. So now it's changed down.
So one of the things I thought when Punisher was captured by that corrupt police task force, when they was like, we look up to him, I expected Punisher to say, you shouldn't look up to me, look up to Captain America, because he does idolize Captain America. I'm surprised he didn't say that, because like, it's one of those things that he holds true. Like Cap is the guy for him.
Yeah.
So
and Cap is kind of what motivates him to do altruistic things when he does it. Like you're right, but I think it's just probably the way that Bernthal is imagining the character. Maybe perhaps it's kind of like Batman. Certain origins he's inspired by Zorro, and then certain origins he's inspired by the fear of bats and things like that. But yeah,
what I didn't understand though too near the end when Punisher is captured in his cage, obviously with 2 handcuffs, why did the cop come shake his hand? Like I would have been like, no, we've seen the Punisher's work. Is that guy new? Does he not know who the Punisher is? Like I wouldn't give him no opportunity to do anything. It would have been like, don't approach the cage. He's Hannibal Lecter.
Basically,
don't approach the cage.
Yeah, he would have been in. He wouldn't have been right there with all the other vigilantes. He'd be somewhere behind several walls of concrete or steel or something like that.
He would be
with confinement.
Yeah, he would have been separated out with like 5 guards just off rip from just like decimating half those dudes before. But
actually, I had one other thing to say that I liked actually, which was and I mentioned this before, but the banter between Frank and Matt just works. Like that when he says to Frank, he's like, he comes in, he's like, you're the last person I expected to see. And obviously that he can smell him, and he's like, what, you shave, you use aftershave and got all nice for me. And but I like that they let those two go at it in that way, but then they follow that up to show that Frank actually did that for Karen. He shaved and got all nice for Karen, and I thought that was funny because that was the one time they didn't use exposition, and they showed us some stuff.
Yeah, because if you remember, Karen was the only one that believed in Frank.
Yeah,
and there was a moment between them, and then it was funny when he said coffee. Anybody who's watched Luke Cage, they're like, "Hell, hold on."
Yeah, exactly.
So there's like an innuendo there. So I'm like,
yeah, there was some nods to the Netflix verse.
And I like that they did that. Like, again, like we're not a big Karen Page fan, but the way that they introduced her into this and how she dropped in worked, right? So it's like they just went through this whole crazy action sequence. They're beat up. Frank is there because someone called in a favor, and then the favor comes in, and this is what you called, and I like that even Karen admitted, like, yo, you act like you don't care, but you don't. She leaves, and then when he's alone, he says, "Take care of yourself." So it's like, again, there's still moments on it where they do a really good job, but it's just like if they would have that much nuance in from the rest of the show, it would have been a better show just in general to watch. Now that being said, we got probably another odd number of episodes coming up, eight or something like that. What are you guys hoping to see at the very least to bring this home for this season? Well, besides, we're gonna have a Punisher spinoff, which will be nice. But I mean, do you think do we need any of the other Netflix people? Do we need a Luke Cage? From the Defenders.
I don't know if we do until they can clean up some of what's happening in the MCU right now. They don't need to keep adding things because they're not able to deliver on like fulfilling experiences as they used to be. So it's like, for example, with this Daredevil show, I would hate for them to start adding Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist and this is the type of narrative that they're going to be rolling out, because having good stuff there versus executing it well are two different things.
I would say it would be cool to see the low-level heroes, street-level heroes, excuse me, be more visible in this world.
Yeah.
Whether he walks into a laundromat and Luke Cage is there, or he's runs into Moon Knight, because Moon Knight is a street-level character, and he's very violent. And I think this would be more concurrent with this violent theme that they have in Daredevil or Punisher, right? Or even, like I said, you don't have to show Spider-Man, but maybe have a scene where people wrapped up in webs, just to acknowledge that they're in that world and it's connected. Because we know, if you're a fan of the comics, there is a street level Avengers team that is present. We don't have to have it happen or have the Defenders come back, but just have them run into each other, like we did in Spider-Man when Matt Murdock was in the room and he caught that rock. We was like, oh, Matt Murdock's in this world, but he's not Daredevil. He's just there. You know? So that's
don't force it
don't force it.
Don't force it like with Yusef Khan and Miss Mark. Like that
what is he doing here?
And they did it in a way that the way it was shot, and I laughed at it because you hear his voice and you see Matt, and then the camera pulls out and it's him, and I'm like, so I'm supposed to go, oh my God, or something like that in that moment. What were they doing? What were they doing?
That's and I think I'm on that tip too, where it's like, let's with what you guys got, just to stick the landing of what you got. And we don't need all the extraness because you guys have already shown us you can't really do it. So it's you just, I'm good with it. Just figure out your story now. Again, we got a cameo from Bullseye, and he's there for some reason, and now he's out in the world doing stuff. And it's like, even at the end when they're kind of wrapping up what was going on, Wilson finally is winning or whatever, and now Daredevil got a team of people that believe in them, a couple non-corrupt police officers, Cherry.
Okay, wait. This team, what kind of team is this? One retired cop,
a bartender,
and 4 beat cops.
Some beat cops that we never saw until that moment.
Yeah.
Karen, who we still don't know what she's done other than maybe a paralegal. I don't know.
Again, this is probably why we need more street level heroes.
It's funny because this is to that point, in the comics, Moon Knight and Punisher have the same dynamic that Punisher and Daredevil has, where it's like, Punisher sees Moon Knight, he's like, yo, you still crazy? And then Moon Knight's like, your wife's still dead? Cool. And they have that. So it's like, those are those types of things where, at the very least now, if, like you said, they got 2 people from the bus stop, Karen Page and a bartender as his backup.
And then there was so much of it that I couldn't help but just kind of laugh at. Sorry, just couldn't help but laugh at, because I'm like, you mean to tell me, Matt, that they set the bottle of Scotch thing up to reveal that Foggy was celebrating early? I was like, what? How convoluted is that? Why did you go down that route?
Yep. So, all that's to say is the title of this episode is Matlock, Born Again.
It was certainly, that show was certainly Daredevil. Like you said, Matt Murdock, attorney at law, featuring Daredevil occasionally.
But yeah, I think that we can leave it there. But oh man, so that's I'm gonna leave it there. That's enough. We can get it out of our system. We slogged through it. It was a long slog, but we got through it. But yeah, thanks for everybody for rocking and listening to us.
One thing, stay tuned. Sinners review coming up soon. So
yes, that's coming up soon.
Ryan Coogler and vampires.
Hey, let's go.
And passing.
Yeah. He said passing.
And passing.
Shout out Haley Steinfeld, sister. But yeah, this is Blerdlines, and we out.
Peace.
Deep sighs, everybody.